All, welcome to our discussion. Can an employer insist that their staff take the COVID-19 vaccine? My name is Dawn H. Jones. I am a HR specialist and owner and director of Hope Place HR. Today I'm joined by Sejal.raja. Sejal is a partner and head of employment at Radcliffe Libressa. She advises employers and employees on all aspects of contentious and non-contentious employment law matters. Before we start, I just want to remind everybody that we are in a confidential space, a public space rather, so just please be mindful of sharing any information that's personal or confidential to you. So the format of the morning is as follows. I will set the context for our discussion. Then I shall ask Sejal several questions on this topic, and then we will move over and give the rest of the meeting over to you as participants, because I'm sure that you will have a number of questions to ask. And we're going to ask, everyone's going to remain on mute. So we're going to ask that if you have any questions, please place them in the chat. We are also conscious that there are a lot of people joining this meeting, and we probably won't be able to answer all of these questions that you pose. So Sejal's kindly agreed to produce an FAQs document that will be available within a week or so of this conversation. So, you know, if you don't get an opportunity for your question to be answered, do not be concerned. Hopefully we'll cover those off in the FAQs. So I just want to set the context for this discussion. And I saw a question on Facebook last week, and the question was, what if employers say no proof of vaccination, no job? And I thought it would be useful to have an informed discussion around that question. Now, according to a Guardian article, Charlie Mullins, who is the chair of Pimlico Plumbers, said that he's instructed his company's lawyers, that the company's lawyers were drafting new employment contracts for its 400-strong workforce to include a vaccine requirement. He also said in another article that, quote, and I quote him, "When we go to Africa and Caribbean countries, we have to have a jab for malaria. We don't think about it, we just do it. So why would we accept something within our country that's going to kill us when we have a vaccine to stop it?" Now, that said, there is, you know, it's well known that there is some reticence amongst some communities about taking the vaccine. And this is reflected in the Sky News article, and they quote figures from the Office of National Statistics, bearing out the fact that there is reticence amongst Black or Black British adults. The same is true for Asian, to some extent, adults as well. And the article also references a video that Black Conservative and Labour MPs recently publicised, encouraging people to take up the vaccine. Now, when I was preparing yesterday, I came across an article in the Health Service Journal, and just to ground this topic a bit more, the article is titled, "Fewer Black and Filipino NHS staff vaccinated amidst hesitancy concern." And I'm just going to take out a few points from this article. And it talks about the largest trust in England has reported substantially lower COVID vaccine uptake amongst its Black African, Black Caribbean and Filipino staff, so far citing vaccine hesitancy. The other London trust directors have also reported a disparity in the take-up of the vaccine between ethnic groups. Guys and St Thomas's say that 80% of their workforce have been vaccinated. However, the rate amongst Black African and Black Caribbean staff is around quarter, and it's lower still for Filipino staff. Now, in the same article, Dame Donna Kinnair of the Royal College of Nursing, she's the General Secretary of the Royal College of Nursing, says, BAME health and care workers are doing all that they can to keep their patients safe while facing a disproportionate risk from COVID-19 themselves. As a member of the NHS Race and Health Observatory Board, I'm aware that some BAME staff have particular concerns in relation to the vaccine. And whilst this isn't the only reason that take-up is lower than it should be, it is important that trusted clinicians take a community approach to discuss the mistrust that is targeting our community. Now, there's a lot of other interesting people quoted in that article. So if you want to read more about that, you can find it on the HSJ website. So given the concern amongst the communities that we have mentioned, I thought it's quite a good lead in to the first question that I have for Sejal. Okay. Just give us a moment. So Sejal, given the concern amongst some communities, do you think that it's the responsibility of employers to educate their staff?
I think that's an interesting question, Dawn. I think it depends. If the employers are making vaccinations mandatory, then I think there is some responsibility to educate employees about the vaccine and discuss with employees the concerns that they may have regarding the vaccines. Generally, though, I think it's up to the local authority and the government to alleviate any concerns regarding the vaccine. I think it shifts to the employer when it is imposing, if it chooses to impose a policy to make vaccines mandatory in the workplace.
Okay, thank you. The second question is, can employers insist that all their employees take the COVID-19 vaccine?
So this is such a tricky issue, and it's a really thorny issue at the moment, because the starting point is that you can't force anyone to have any medical treatment against their wishes. It's a breach of the Human Rights Act. So that's a starting point. But employers do have a responsibility under the health and safety regulations to make sure that they have a safe place for their employees to work.
Okay.
And you have to try and balance both of those interests, the health and safety at work act and the breach of the Human Rights Act, if you try and mandate employees to have the vaccine. So my view is it's difficult for employers to force employees to have the vaccine unless they do a client-facing role which could have an impact on their colleagues or the people they work with. So let's take, for example, you have somebody working in the health sector, in a care home, in an NHS trust, where they are working with vulnerable people. Yeah. I think legitimately employers could say, well, actually, we would like you to take the vaccine, because by not taking the vaccine, and in view of the recent statistics and information published earlier this week, that the vaccine can prevent the transmission of the virus, employees in those sectors could say, well, actually, we do require you to take the vaccine. Not only will it help protect the vulnerable people that you're helping, but it also stops the transmission to your colleagues to make sure it's a safe place for them to work as well. However, in another sector, for example, like Pimlico Plumbers, I'm not sure how he can say that it's important for employees to have vaccines in that industry. So I think it's going to depend on the sector you work in. I think it's going to depend on the industry and the type of work you're involved in.
Okay. So there's some preconditions to whether or not an employer can safely mandate that. Okay, third question, can employers change the employment contracts of existing employees to compel them to take the vaccine?
So there's a lot of talk at the moment to say that actually, if it's in the contract of employment, it's easier to force employees to take the vaccine. Now, if it's not in the contract, the first step an employer will have to do is amend the contract.
Yeah.
And employers can't unilaterally amend a contract, whether to take a vaccine or otherwise.
Yeah.
It has to go through a process. And the process it has to go through is, firstly, it needs to have a reason, a good reason to amend the contract. And secondly, it's got to go through a process, and the process would be consulting with the employee before it can change the contract. Now, again, in this situation, if the amendment to the contract is to implement a clause to say that you have got to take a vaccine before you're able to work, then the employer has to have a good reason to do so. And it's the same sort of issues that I've suggested earlier. So it depends on the type of work you do, it depends on the sector you're in, to have that good business reason. And then you have to consult with individuals to allow that amendment to take place.
Okay, thank you. Fourth question. Are there any legal risks associated with employers requiring their staff to take the vaccine as a condition of employment or continued employment?
Okay, so let's say we have an organisation. They are saying to employees, right, you have to take the vaccine if you want to continue to work here.
Mm-hmm.
Employee says, absolutely no way, I'm not going to do this, because for whatever reason, I just don't want to take the vaccine. The employer should speak to the employee and consult with the employee to find out exactly what the concerns are. If the concerns are, for example, the employee is thinking of getting starting a family, and there's sort of information out there that it could affect fertility. If the employee has medical conditions that could impact on taking the vaccine, if there are religious grounds, then the employer should take those into consideration. If, despite all of that, there is no sort of rationale that the employee can put forward as to why they're reluctant to take the vaccine, the employer could say, well, actually, because you're in a role that is looking after vulnerable people, or it could have an impact on the workforce because there's a risk of transmission, then they could say, well, we're going to terminate your employment because of that. And the employee could have a claim for unfair dismissal. Now, the difficulty is this is not tested at all.
Yeah.
And it's not a one size fits all. It's not black and white. It's going to depend on the circumstances of the employee. It's going to depend on the circumstances of the employer. But if the employer has got good reasons as to why the employee cannot work unless they've taken the vaccine, then I think they would have a good defence to a claim for a unfair dismissal claim. There could also be claims for discrimination, because if, for example, notwithstanding the fact that the employee has a disability and can't have a vaccine, it's still forced upon the individual, the employee could have a disability discrimination claim. If the employee doesn't want to take the vaccine for religious beliefs, then that could be a discrimination claim there.
Okay. So we've talked about potential dismissal, but can an employee be disciplined for refusing to take the vaccine?
I don't think so, because it's not a conduct issue.
Yeah.
It's not a conduct issue. It's if there is going to be a dismissal, then I think it's going to be a dismissal on the grounds of some other substantial reason, i.e. that the employment cannot continue because it's not safe for the individual to carry on being employed because they're not able to take the vaccine, or it's not the fact that they're not taking the vaccine is not making it a safe place for their colleagues to work. So I don't think it's a disciplinary issue. It's not conduct, but there could be another reason for dismissal.
Okay. And lastly, sorry, excuse me, what advice would you give to an employee who has concerns about taking a vaccination?
So if I was acting for an employee, which I invariably do, my first starting point would be to make sure the employer knows the concerns and sets out those concerns to the employer. A number of employees who I act for, when they have got concerns about their employment, when I say, well, have you raised it with your employer? No, haven't, can't do so. And I would implore individuals who have got concerns with the vaccine or with any issues relating to COVID to speak to their employer about it. And if the employer is not listening, then to raise a grievance.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you, Sejal. We're now going to move into our question section where we open it up to all of you to ask the questions, any questions that you may have. And we've got some coming in all of a sudden. Thank you. So Nishun, I apologise if I haven't pronounced your name properly, makes a comment, and presumably if someone is anti-vax, risk of discrimination on the grounds of political beliefs. So I think he or she is, so I'm not sure the sex. I think they're asking that if someone is saying that, you know, they're anti-vax or, you know, they're claiming grounds of discrimination, would those be sound grounds?
Yeah, so basically, there would be a potential indirect discrimination claim if the reason you are not taking the vaccine is because you have a belief that people or you shouldn't be taking the vaccine. So that could be a belief under the religion or belief section of the Equality Act.
Yeah.
The hurdle that we would have to, any employee would have to overcome is establishing that that is an appropriate belief that falls within the Equality Act. And if that's proved that it is a belief and protected under the Equality Act, then the employer will have to show that it has a legitimate reason for enforcing this policy for employees to take the vaccine.
Yeah.
And then that goes back to the whole health and safety aspect of it. So is it a legitimate reason to have this policy because you are trying to protect the health and well-being of your workforce, and you're trying to prevent the transmission of the virus to colleagues and to clients and service users?
Okay. Thank you. Another question is, could it not be conduct as a willful refusal to follow reasonable management instruction?
It could be conduct, but I wouldn't go down the conduct route. If I was advising an employer, because you've got to balance the human rights aspect of it, because at the end of the starting point is that you can't force anybody to have medical treatment against their own will.
Mm-hmm.
And also, the government hasn't mandated the vaccine as compulsory either.
Yeah.
So yes, an employer could say it's a failure to follow reasonable management instruction, but I think forcing somebody to have a vaccine isn't a reasonable management instruction.
Yeah. It goes beyond the boundaries of that, doesn't it?
It does. I think it does. That's my view.
Yeah. Okay. Some employees are breaking down in tears because they are being told that they are being irresponsible by not taking a vaccine, even though they do not want to take it. How should staff manage this? Okay.
So I don't think it's fair for employers not to communicate and educate employees about the vaccine. I think that's really an important aspect of an employer's role.
Yeah.
And I think blaming somebody in that way is wrong. Yeah. I think if that's the perception and if that's what is being communicated, then I think the individual needs to sort of raise a grievance against their employer to say, well, actually, I have my own beliefs, I have my own issues, and these are my reasons as to why I'm not able to take the vaccine.
Yeah. And there's something about being sensitive and, you know, promoting the health and well-being of that employee as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Next question, can you deny employment to someone who indicates that they would not be willing to take the vaccine?
Yes, so that's probably easier than having somebody who's already employed. And I think if you mention it right at the outset in the recruitment process on the basis that this is the role that you'll be undertaking, these are the these are the reasons why we need people to take the vaccine. And if you're not able to take the vaccine, then we can't offer you the role.
Yeah.
Then employers can do that. But bear in mind, a candidate may have a claim for indirect discrimination because you don't need to be an employee to bring a discrimination claim on the basis that it could be under one of the protected characteristics, for example, disability, female because they want to get pregnant, they want to have a family, or it could be a political belief because they just are against vaccines. So that needs to be borne in mind.
Yeah.
I think if employers are going to have a policy like that, they need to put in place rationale and good reasons as to why they are putting that policy in place and document it.
Yeah, and potentially for those individuals who may be exempted from that requirement, you know, if they've got a disability or they have a valid reason for not taking the vaccine in the first place.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next question, can employers state at the recruitment stage that having had vaccine is a requirement of employment, or does this open up discrimination claims? So I think it's similar to the question that you've just answered, okay?
Yeah.
So next question, it is not well communicated that the vaccine will not prevent an individual from getting ill with COVID-19 and or passing it on. Therefore, all the current precautions remain mandatory, thereby negating the argument for enforcement. So I think that question is talking about the fact that the vaccine isn't 100% effective.
Yeah,
at the moment.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that individuals can take into account. We've only had information this week published. Well, it's not even published yet, but on the news saying that actually the AstraZeneca vaccine actually is going to be more effective, and also it's 60 or 70% effective in reducing transmission.
Yeah.
But that is something that employers will have to take into account when putting in place a policy to make vaccines mandatory, and it's got to undertake a risk assessment as to the impact of the vaccine or not having the vaccine will have on its workforce, and if necessary, any clients or service users. Okay.
And I'm assuming that impact assessment will also extend to employees as well. So it's about, you know, you talking about that, not that one size fits approach. It doesn't fit everybody.
No, it doesn't. Absolutely not.
Okay. Next question. If service users, clients get COVID from one of your members of staff and it can be proven to be so, do you feel that there would be a valid claim against the organisation?
Sorry, Dawn, can you just repeat that?
If a service user or clients got COVID from a member of staff and it could be proven that was the case, the question is, do you feel that there would be a valid claim against the organisation?
Yeah, absolutely. Because unless the organisation can show that they took all reasonable steps to prevent the transmission, then potentially there is a claim in negligence there. And I guess that's what employers are worried about when they're making vaccines mandatory, because they're worried about negligence claims from people. Yeah.
And I'm assuming some of this may also be driven by the protections that the insurance companies are ultimately going to want to provide as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. So those are the wider considerations. Okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry, just jumped here. What if the employee agrees to regular testing to ensure they are safe to do face-to-face work? So I'm assuming, so this question is from Judy, so if I'm wrong, please correct me, but in the event that an employee chooses not to take the vaccine, however, they are willing to submit to regular testing, if the employee agrees to regular testing to ensure they are safe to do face-to-face work, do you think that would be sufficient?
I think that's a good alternative to put to the employer, to say, okay, I appreciate why you want individuals to have the vaccine because you want to try and avoid the transmission of risk. Yeah. However, as an alternative, I'm prepared to do this. And you know, the employer will have to consider that.
Yeah. And then come back with a response. or their rationale as to whether or not they think it to be appropriate or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks. Next question. Can NHS employees be told that they will have to forgo their shielding rights for not wanting to take the vaccine?
So I'm assuming that in the NHS, the shielding rights are that if you're shielding, you get full pay. I think that's
I'm assuming
correct.
that's correct, yeah.
I think that's a tricky one.
Yeah.
I think that's a tricky one because it's, thank you, you've confirmed, yeah, okay. That is a tricky one because you are saying to individuals that if you don't have the vaccine, you're not going to get full pay for shielding.
Then you can be discriminated.
And so
Okay.
they will need to have a good reason as to why that's the case, because at the moment, all employees are entitled to shield, and in particular the NHS staff get full pay for doing it, whereas non-NHS staff can be furloughed. And I guess the rationale for NHS employers saying, well, you've got to have the vaccine is because they want to bring them back to work because they're doing business critical roles. So potentially they could, but again, we need to know what the rationale for that is.
Yeah, okay. So it's really stopping and asking the question, an obvious question, rather than say, you know, having this blanket approach, just because there's a vaccine that everybody has to have that vaccine, or the work environment being made so uncomfortable that people feel compelled to take the vaccine.
Absolutely.
Ultimately.
Yeah, because it's not black and white. I think you need to just ask the questions, understand the rationale, and try and put forward alternatives to alleviate concerns.
Yeah.
On both sides.
Yeah. Yeah. And it goes back to your point of consulting with the employee. Consultation is a two-way street. Okay. Just read this one a moment. The science at the moment indicates that the vaccine won't prevent you from getting COVID and or passing it on to others. It will prevent you from getting seriously ill and ending up in hospital and dying. It doesn't cover new mutations emerging all the time. So the vaccine. Sorry, can I just ask everyone to put themselves on mute? I'll start again. Sorry, Sejal. The science at the moment indicates that the vaccine won't prevent you from getting COVID and or passing it on to others. It will prevent you from getting seriously ill and ending up in hospital and dying. It doesn't cover new mutations emerging all the time, so the vaccine will be made mandatory. What choices will people have for refusing it? I think you've answered that to some extent, but I don't know if you had anything else.
Yeah, I think the science about this is evolving. It's a new thing. We're all coming to grips with it, and it is changing. So I think employers will have to keep evolving in terms of their advice and what they are making mandatory. They've got to keep updating any risk assessments they're doing based on the advice that's coming out about the vaccine and the percentage, you know, how it impacts on individuals and the transmission risk. But at the end of the day, there's got to be consultation and there's got to be good reasons as to why the vaccine is mandatory for that specific sector.
Okay, so I've got a question. So given that, you know, it's well known that the vaccine take-up amongst certain groups are lower than what the government would like.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's a place for not obviously communicating to members of staff, but there is maybe a case for cultural competency for whoever is communicating that requirement?
Yeah.
Because different ethnicities will have different views and different requirements.
Yeah, I think it's really important that whoever is delivering and educating staff has to be competent in being able to do it and be mindful of the ethnicities of the people they're speaking to.
Okay.
And the cultures of the people that they're speaking to as well.
Yeah. If you have a member of staff who is based in an office, for example, they may be, say they're based within an NHS setting, and they're patient facing. so maybe a clerk in an outpatients. Would the requirement for those group of staff be as acute as those for a doctor or nurse or physio, for example?
No, because I think you could put in measures for people like that to avoid any transmission.
Okay.
Because if the key requirement of the organisation is to prevent transmission and to protect other staff, you can have the person doing the clerking role with a screen, wearing PPE, to avoid any risk of being near individuals. Whereas if you have somebody who is in a client-facing, service user-facing role, then I think that's a different requirement, because you can't have, you know, even the PPE doesn't seem to work in certain respects. So yeah, it's gonna depend on the type of role, the sector, individual circumstances, and all of that has to be taken into account when considering this.
Okay. So an employer who is considering, well, employers are considering already, but they should have a policy in place which they widely communicate, and as part of that policy, they should have a risk assessment that's widely communicated to members of staff. So say, for example, you have a member of staff who is, an employer who wants to bring undue pressure on an employee, and that employee is very reluctant to take it, but they take the vaccine because they feel coerced into taking it. It's either take it or lose my job, essentially. Are there any risks for employers in that scenario?
Yeah, absolutely. So the employee could resign and bring a claim for constructive unfair dismissal. And, you know, God forbid, if the employee then became ill because of the vaccine, very ill because taking the vaccine impacted on them in certain respects, then there could be a negligence claim.
Okay, thank you. I've got a question from Janet. Are employers obliged to provide risk assessments?
Yes, particularly in relation to getting people back to work. They should have they should do a COVID risk assessment, they should do a risk assessment anyway, but this should be shared with employees, and good employers are consulting with employees about the risk assessments they do. And that's what employers should be doing, because that way any employees that have got concerns about their working environment, that's a really good opportunity to raise those concerns and for employees to take into account those concerns at that stage.
Okay. Given that the virus is mutating, okay, if a member of staff is vaccinated in this round, and employers, I'm assuming, I may be wrong, would employers require their staff to take subsequent vaccine, for example, on an annual basis?
Yeah, I mean, it's like taking the flu vaccine. I think that's what's going to happen with this. So, I mean, employers don't mandate the taking of flu vaccines.
No, they don't.
But because the impact that this virus has, an employer could mandate the taking of the COVID vaccine annually.
Okay. So is it more likely than not that nurses and doctors would be required to take the vaccine? And if they refused, is it more likely than not that an employer would have be on safer ground in dismissing them ultimately?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think frontline workers, for example, care staff in the care home sector, doctors, nurses, are probably ones that actually employers could say, if you don't take the vaccine, we could dismiss you.
Okay, on the grounds of some other substantial
A
reason.
substantial reason, yeah.
Okay, and what about, is that the same? Is the same true for teachers, because they're in a frontline role as well?
They are, but I think with teachers it's different, because children aren't impacted with the virus as much as sort of us older people, well, me older people. So I'm not sure they would be, unless the school wanted to make sure that the virus wasn't transmitted to colleagues, and therefore it meant that there couldn't be the teaching in place for children if the whole school went down with everyone having COVID, for example.
Yeah. Okay. Excuse me. What hurdles do you foresee for employers who aren't willing to communicate and engage with their staff? You know, especially those groups that there's hesitancy about amongst taking up the vaccine.
Yeah, so I think if there are groups that are hesitant in taking the vaccine, I think it's really important for employers to engage with them and speak to them to try and alleviate their concerns and try and think of alternatives to taking the vaccine, or see if there's alternative roles.
Right. Okay. Joan has put into the chat, may affect the COVID-19 may affect special schools with children with medical conditions.
Yeah, that's right. So they might be in the same category as doctors and nurses and care home staff. Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah. And MJ's comment is, new guidance has just been released that primary school age children over 7 should wear masks in all communal areas, but not in class. So it's kind of like, it's a moving feast, this, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, exactly. And that's why I think if you're an employer, you need to just keep revisiting your risk assessments and your policies in line with the guidance that keeps changing. I remember when furlough first came out last year, gosh, it's been a year already. The guidance just kept changing, and trying to keep on top of it was just ridiculous. And I think employers have to do that with this as well.
Okay.
And this is more important because you're asking individuals to take a vaccine when they're not comfortable with it.
Yeah. And particularly if they signal that their discomfort and the employer still, insists that they take the vaccine. So I could see a scenario potentially where a member of staff says, well, actually goes off sick with stress and or depression on long-term sick because they feel that they're being pressured and coerced by their manager to take the vaccine.
No, absolutely. There could be huge repercussions with this.
Okay. So excuse me. A question from Judy is, if the employee is mandated to take the vaccine despite presenting objections and said employee has adverse reactions, are employers liable? I think you answered that question, but maybe Judy finds afterwards. Yeah,
I think it's going to depend on, potentially liable.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about the employer and in terms of an employer's responsibilities, but there are responsibilities for the employees, aren't there? What would you characterize them to be?
I think employees have a duty. Well, I mean, again, the Health and Safety at Work Act applies to employees as well. There's responsibility on employees. And I think employees, if they're uncomfortable about any of these issues, they should absolutely talk to their employers about it and make sure it's documented as well. And also not just rely on the employers to come up with solutions, but the employees should try and come up with solutions as well. Because that way it will help achieve a solution that both parties are happy with.
Okay. Do you think in this, within the context of our discussion, that occupational health have a role to play? So we've talked about the employer, which is it could be manager, or it could be the strategic sense from the board of directors and so forth, and non-execs. But what role would you envisage occupational health playing?
So I think if the employer is mandating the vaccine and the employee is concerned for various reasons, I think occupational health can come in to support the manager and the employee in dealing with trying to reach a resolution that both parties are happy with. And occupational health in this situation can be seen to be independent, and also takes into account any medical issues the employee has and try and work out any adjustments that might be possible.
In the event that an employee went off sick on long-term sickness and they cited stress and distress as a result of being asked to take the COVID-19 vaccine, I imagine that employers would need to deal with that issue before they could actually deal with the primary issue, which was, we want you to take the vaccine.
Yeah, so I think in that situation, I think the employer will have to look at other ways of the employee working without having to take the vaccine. So it might be moving them to a non-patient role, for example.
Yeah.
But if for whatever reason the vaccine has to be taken, and I just can't see its case when it has to be taken, then you're going to have to go through the capability process and manage this long-term sickness absence to try and alleviate that. But I just don't see how you can alleviate it if they don't want to take the vaccine. So the employer is going to have to come up with a way to allow the employee to work without having to take the vaccine.
Okay. And failing that, then it's probably a formal hearing under whatever policy to consider the employee's continued employment.
Yeah.
Right, got a question here. If I refuse the vaccine, can I insist on keeping taking a lateral flow test twice a week as I am doing now? Now, some individuals, I know you've answered this before, but some individuals have joined since.
Okay, yeah, no, absolutely. So that is an alternative that you can put to your employer and say, look, I've got concerns about the vaccine, but here's an alternative. And that way we know that I'm not spreading it. And if that's the risk, if that's the concern that the employer has is about the transmission, then by me taking the test every week, that gives you some comfort.
Okay, super. Given the constant wave of changes regarding the vaccine, Given the constant wave of changes regarding the vaccine, its effectiveness and efficacy, etc., is there enough grounds for employees to refuse a vaccine for the time being, or can the employer insist on the taking of the vaccine?
That's a good question. I think that's a really good reasoned argument to go back to your employer and say, look, there's not enough information out there for me to satisfy myself, and therefore I'm not discounting that I'm not going to take the vaccine, but I just need more information, and I just want to wait a month or so till we get that more information.
Yeah, I think so as well. The vaccination program has its stand. It's not yet mandatory. The chief nurse, Ruth May, was clear about this. So thank you for that comment. And that's the sense that I get. Sorry, can you just make sure everybody's on mute, please? And that's definitely the sense that I get from the HSJ article, that it's not currently, sorry, just bear with me, just to see if I can move it. It's not currently mandatory, but it certainly could move in that direction, couldn't it?
Oh, it could. The government hasn't legislated it to be mandatory at all. And so, and I would be surprised if it was made mandatory. I really would. And I think if it was, I think there would be a judicial review against the government for doing so. And that's why it's really tricky. Because, because, you know, if it's not if the government hasn't made it mandatory, why are employers making it mandatory?
Yeah. And so employers have got to be really watchful over the fact that if they did compel, say, for example, a doctor to take the vaccine, albeit that they're in the frontline role, because a lot of this is untested, they could still face significant risk if individuals went to the employment tribunal.
Yeah.
Superb, thank you. I've got a question here. Whilst this isn't directly vaccine related, picking up on the point on long-term sickness and hearing under capability, do you have a view on a risk around dismissal, whether employees off for over a year with long COVID with no clear end in sight?
Yeah, I mean, I think under the capability procedures, if somebody has been absent for a year, I think employers are entitled to dismiss on the grounds of capability.
Yeah.
provided they've gone through the process, they've got medical reports to see what the prognosis is, and if the prognosis is that it's not going to improve for a significant period, then I think employees could be justified in dismissing for capability grounds, sadly.
So it's similar to any long-term sickness absence. It just happens to be that the rationale for dismissal will potentially be long COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
you.
I think so.
The individual says thank you for answering their question, as did, yeah.
It is interesting.
So does anyone have any further questions? Okay, got a couple come in. Wait with us a moment. Maybe this is helpful.
You could be dispensed if you have long COVID.
Doesn't the sickness and absence policy need rewriting anyway due to COVID?
I don't think so, because I think if you're ill with COVID, you're still ill.
Yeah.
I don't think it needs to be rewritten. I know the statutory sick pay provisions were rewritten to allow individuals that are self-isolating to get statutory sick pay because they're not ill. But I think if you're ill with COVID, you're still sick. So I don't think they need to be rewritten.
Yeah, it'd just be managed under long-term procedure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, so I'll ask one whilst we wait to see if there's any more. Okay. Yeah, someone put a comment in there that long COVID may become an issue.
It absolutely could, and it could become a disability within the meaning of the Equality Act. And therefore, if individual has conditions following long COVID, which means that they can't do their role as they could before, an employer will have to try and see if there's reasonable adjustments and accommodate those if they can. So no, I agree, long COVID could be an issue and could be deemed to be a disability within the meaning of the Equality Act.
Okay, so we're in the last 10 minutes or so. So excuse me. What would you say to people? Hold on a moment, I'll hold that question. What rights does a member of staff have being off sick with COVID-19 and under pressure from management to resume work sorry, I'm just having to rephrase this, and are being told a post, or I'm assuming told their post will be filled?
Wow, I think that's shocking if that's what the employer is doing. I think that if somebody's ill with COVID, they should be allowed to recover before any discussions arise about their post, and their post shouldn't be filled whilst they're off sick, particularly with COVID.
Yeah. If the employee has COVID, does the employee, if an employee has COVID, are they potentially, sorry, bear with us a moment. If employee has COVID, does employee, I'm not sure what that question actually is saying. So I'm not sure if that question is asking, is the individual entitled? Okay, if an employee is off sick with COVID, does the employer have to pay them sick pay, is the question.
Yeah, so the sick pay provisions in accordance with the sick pay policy would apply. Yeah. So if there's contractual sick pay, then they would be entitled to contractual sick pay. If not, it'd be statutory sick pay.
Okay, but it'd be some form of pay.
Yeah.
Okay. If an employee has COVID, does the employer, I think that's the same question. Bear with us a moment. Okay. Any further questions before we start to wrap up? Let's give people time to think. Following on from this discussion, what do you think are the 3 top considerations that an employer needs to have? Sorry, I'm not sure who that is. Let me mute that person. Yeah, what are the three considerations an employer would need to have going forward? And what are the three considerations that an employee would need to have going forward?
Sorry, there's some noise in the background. Sorry,
Yeah,
can you just repeat that, Dawn? Sorry.
I'm just trying to go through to see who's, I think we're okay now. So going forward, what are the three considerations that an employer would need to consider in terms of priority, and the same for the employee?
In terms of COVID and vaccines?
Yeah.
I think for the employer, it's got to be making sure that its policy and risk assessments are sound before it implements anything. Because it's all very well saying to employees, right, we want you to have the vaccine, but without having any thought about it. So have you thought about how you can manage the workforce without people having the vaccine? So I think that's really important. And then, of course, consulting with staff about it rather than making and imposing it unilaterally.
Yeah.
And listening is so important. And for employees, it's engaging.
Yeah.
It's engaging and making sure that you engage right at the outset rather than leaving it till the end when you feel, actually, I don't like this, and then putting in your views, because it might be too late then.
Yeah. It's making sure that you know what your responsibilities are in the context of where you're at.
Yeah.
Got a question here. Can an employer name and shame staff who have not had the vaccine?
No. I think that would be, no. You can, but I just think that would be just so detrimental to the workforce.
I think
and actually, why should you name and shame staff when you don't know the reasons why that individual is not taking the vaccine?
Yeah.
And it could give rise to a claim for constructive unfair dismissal from that employee.
Yeah. And a breach of confidentiality, I'd imagine as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Can reasonable grounds for not taking the staff? Are there reasonable grounds for not taking the vaccine on the grounds of safety? This person's written, the MHRA awarded a contract in October 2020 to an A1 company, Genpack, to process the unexpected high volumes of COVID-19 vaccine adverse drug reactions. So the government accepts that the vaccine is not safe, as the development of the vaccine has been accelerated so fast that a complete picture of safety is not available.
I think it goes back to the question, one of the questions I answered, if you're concerned about the safety of the vaccine and taking the vaccine because there's not enough information out there, one option you can say to your employees, look, I'm not saying no, full stop, but I need more information, and I want to wait for more information to come out before I'm willing to take it.
Okay. And in that event, what would be reasonable? What would be a reasonable length of time for people to gather their information? Or
well, it's an ongoing process, isn't it?
Yeah.
I would say, look, let's just wait another month.
Yeah.
Because the vaccine is still being rolled out.
Yeah. So there's still time.
Let's wait another one. Yeah, let's wait another month to see what information we get. And if we haven't got the information, then let's say, look, let's give it another couple of months. If the employer it's so business critical that they need people to have the vaccine, which I don't think they would be. I think they could manage for a month or so, maybe 2 months. Then, they've managed for a year now already. So I'm not sure what 1 or 2 months is going to achieve. So I suggest initially a month to see what further information comes out, and then extend it to 2 months.
Yeah. And particularly if the employee is willing to submit to regular testing and other safety precautionary measures.
Absolutely.
Okay. I think this will be the last question. Bear with us a moment. I think those are all the questions. So last opportunity, everyone, if you want to pose a question before we finish, please do so. Sejal, in the meantime, will we still be doing the FAQs?
I'm happy to do one. Just Yeah, I'll do an FAQ of sort of consolidating the main points that came out of today.
Yeah.
And I can circulate that to you.
Thank you. And that'll be available. So we just want to manage expectations in a week or so. And I will send out a link to where you can actually pick up those FAQs. Last word to you, Sejal. And can you also tell people where they can contact you as well?
Yeah, well, they're more than welcome to contact me.
Yeah.
But I just want to thank all of you for the questions that you've posed. It's been really interesting, and I hope you found it useful. Dawn, will you, what I'll do is I'll put my contact details at the end of the FAQ, so then people will have it from there.
Superb, superb. Thank you, everybody. Unless there are any further questions, I'll just quickly have a look in the chat before we pop. People are just saying very informative session, very useful. Thanks for arranging this, Dawn and Sejal. Thank you. Loads of thank yous coming through. So I too add my thanks. I thank Sejal because I asked her and she said immediately. So thank you very much. And also to Sarah. I've not met Sarah, but thank you for your help also. And hopefully we'll be back with another topic soon. So God bless and have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, thank you.